Hey guys, before we get started, I want to start covering more low-key teams that had very successful off seasons, very similar to the Memphis Grizzlies. So if there are any teams that you would like to see covered personally, just let me know in the comment section down below, or you can let me know by commenting on any of my pictures on Instagram or tweeting at me, whichever is easiest for you. Now, since their inception, the Memphis Grizzlies were perennial cellar dwellers in the competitive Western Conference. Their greatest era being the grit and grind era between the 2010 season and the 2017 season that resulted in numerous high seeds in the Western Conference but zero championships. These teams were built upon the shoulders of players such as Michael Conley, a player who used to be known as just Greg Oden's teammate 10 years ago, who was now known for his abilities as one of the NBA's greatest technical point guards. Marc Gasol, a player who was known as the lesser of two Gasol brothers, who was just thrown in when the Lakers dealt for his brother Pau in 2008. And Zach Randolph, a player who was known as a locker room cancer and a potential bust. These three players, alongside other players, redefined their legacies during that era, and within 2 years we saw that era slowly become dismantled. When the Grizzlies finally decided to trade Marc Gasol to the Raptors, which made sense for the sake of their brand new top 5 pick Jaren Jackson's development. And I began to think that this was the beginning of the end for the Grizzlies, especially since they still had Michael Conley on the roster, and it was my belief that initially the Grizzlies wanted to keep Conley, until they wound up with the number 2 overall pick in the 2019 draft. It was then and only then that it seemed plausible to move on from Conley as well. So I'm not sure if you are all aware, but while the Lakers were trading for Anthony Davis, the Clippers were building a dynamic duo to rival that, the Houston Rockets were trading for Russell Westbrook, and, a ton of other crazy things happening in this offseason, there was a team that secretly made some incredible moves this offseason, and that team is the Memphis Grizzlies. And I really feel like they should be applauded because they're not really a popular team it's not really a popular topic to talk about the Grizzlies in the offseason, but we really should just sit back and look at their body of work after seeing so many teams do things pretty wrong. Like, we saw the Orlando Magic max out Nikola Vucevic, which kind of hurts Mo Bamba's development. We saw teams like the Charlotte Hornets lowball Kemba Walker, only to sign Terry Rozier to a ridiculous contract. So today in this video, we're going to take you through how the Memphis Grizzlies are rebuilding and what they're doing correctly, and give some Grizzlies fans some hope for optimism. The first move they made was during the NBA draft. They drafted a player who most scouts saw as a sure thing at the point guard position in Ja Morant. And if you ask me, I really thought that this was a 2 to 3 person draft. This was what I think is a RJ Barrett, Ja Morant, and Zion Williamson draft. And RJ Barrett is a very huge wild card, so more likely it could be just a 2-person draft. And to give you a quick analysis on Ja Morant, imagine a player who is not as quick as John Wall or De'Aaron Fox, but an incredible finisher who has an inconsistent jump shot that I cannot help but feel like is going to get there after 2 to 3 years. I saw it fall a couple of times in the NCAA tournament, and he seems to be getting more and more comfortable shooting it. I'm assuming he didn't shoot it much in college because it's not a strength for him, but I could see it becoming something that he could rely on down the future. I am a huge fan of his game. He is extremely lengthy, which means that he can become a defensive stud potentially. His body kind of reminds me a little bit of Brandon Ingram's in the sense that he is 6'3" and has a huge wingspan, and he has very long arms. He appears to be a player with an incredible passing ability, and my favorite part about him is how he is athletic, but his game isn't solely dependent on his athleticism. If I was to compare his finishing ability, I would say he attacks the rim like a 29-year-old Kobe Bryant would, meaning with a lot of finesse and a dash of athleticism, but he's not like a John Wall type of player where he only needs to jump out of the gym in order to finish the play. Now, in addition to Ja Morant, who could arguably be the best player in this draft looking down 5 years down the line, and I know that might sound crazy, but you never know what could happen in 5 years from now. Remember that in the 2014 NBA draft, many people thought Andrew Wiggins was going to revolutionize the NBA, and looking back at that draft, the only player that turned out to be good was Joel Embiid, who everyone thought was going to bust. So anything could happen, but you should also take into account that Ja Morant wasn't the only player that they drafted. In fact, they also selected Brandon Clarke out of Gonzaga with the 21st pick in the draft. And in addition to that, if you were watching Summer League, I'm sure most of y'all would know this, but Brandon Clarke was the Summer League MVP, and he reminds me of Kyle Kuzma, not in the way he plays, but in the sense that he is an older rookie. He's 23 years old, and he has a fairly complete game. All he's really missing is a three-point shot, which he was even able to hit on occasion in Summer League. So if I was to compare his game to somebody, he reminds me of JaMychal Green a little bit, with a better finishing ability. But for the most part, if you look at Clarke's highlights, it's mainly him finishing excellent plays that he was set up for by his teammates. Being realistic, I know he was Summer League MVP, and just like Kyle Kuzma, I see him becoming an extremely high-end role player. And if he learns how to handle the ball better, I can even see the Grizzlies using him in a Pascal Siakam-like role down the line. Now, beyond the draft, the Grizzlies made some even better moves. I know the 2017 NBA draft is beginning to look like a fairly weak draft considering how the top 2 picks are already on brand new teams, but the Memphis Grizzlies took a flyer on the number 4 pick in the 2017 NBA draft by trading for Josh Jackson. Now, bear in mind that Josh Jackson still has some time to put it together, and if you really remember the 2017 NBA draft, Josh Jackson could have easily went number 2, number 3, or number 4. And when he went number 4, it was considered a surprise. Many teams thought that he was going to get selected by the Celtics at number 3, but they went with Jason Tatum. And he has time to put it together and was actually looking very good for the Phoenix Suns by the end of his first year. So good that the Suns decided to send him to the 2018 NBA draft lottery as their representative. But for some reason, the Phoenix Suns thought it was necessary to trade for Mikal Bridges 1 year later, and Mikal Bridges plays the same position as Josh Jackson, so Jackson subsequently saw his usage and his statistics dip. Now, bear in mind that Josh Jackson's only 22, and his timeline is on par with Jaren Jackson's and Ja Morant's. And Josh Jackson essentially got drafted into the league once again at a much younger age than Brandon Clarke did as well. Remember, Brandon Clarke's 23. Now, in the draft, they absolutely killed it. In terms of trades, they absolutely killed it as well. Giving up on Michael Conley, Grizzlies traded Michael Conley to bring back Kyle Korver and also get some young pieces in Grayson Allen, but they also got an incredible role player in Jay Crowder. And on top of that, they got themselves a 2020 or 2021 draft pick and a lightly protected pick from 2022 to 2024 from the Jazz. And you have to think about it, the Jazz may not be that good in 2022 to 2024, or they may be incredibly good because they already have their player that they're building around in Donovan Mitchell. They have their franchise cornerstone potentially. So they did an incredible job by getting some great assets in return for Michael Conley. They also get a little bit under the cap because his contract was huge. And in free agency, they were able to sign Jonas Valanciunas to a 3-year, $45 million deal, which is a fair price for the big man and is an extremely tradable contract as well, should they decide to want to send him to a competing team that needs a piece like that down the line. But if not, Jonas Valanciunas was playing great basketball as a Grizzly last year, and he was a great return for an aging Marc Gasol. Now, they also did lose DeLon Wright, and they brought in Tyus Jones. And I'm sure that Tyus Jones is going to be able to fill that void perfectly. And in the end, if you're asking me how many wins do I expect the Memphis Grizzlies to win this year, I actually think they're going to do worse than they did last year. Last year, I think they won 33 games. I expect them to win about 25 this year. But I expect them to make it out to the playoffs maybe in 2 to 3 years from now, depending on the development of Jaren Jackson, Josh Jackson, Ja Morant. Brandon Clarke's ceiling seems to be set. All he could really do is try to hit threes at a Draymond Green-like rate, and he'll be an incredible role player. I wouldn't be shocked if it's another 3 years until we see a competitive Grizzlies team, but you have to understand that with Ja Morant and Josh Jackson on that team, you have two athletic, high-flying players, and on top of that, you have Jaren Jackson, who's also a freak athlete in his own way. The Grizzlies are not really going to be grind city, but they're going to be a ton of fun to watch. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about the Memphis Grizzlies? Do you think they're going to do better than I said this year? Do you think their rebuild's going to take longer than 3 years? Maybe 5 years? Is there something you wish that they did during the offseason that could have sped up their rebuild a little bit? I'd really like to hear what you guys have to say. Thanks for watching.